Hey, it's Ina from Taproot Tarot, and tomorrow we'll start the Drop 'em 78 challenge. This will be my first time trying it out. I have been a longtime follower of Esther and I'm excited to finally do this challenge. I'm going to do it in the form of short posts, both on Instagram and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. So it'll be a daily post on each card, and I think short videos will keep it easier for me and maybe a little more accessible rather than having to look for my posts. And I chose a deck that would have an element of, learning about historical tarot. And Paul Huson is a really great resource for that. He especially focuses on the practice of tarot cartomancy from Atea onward. And as such, this deck has illustrated pips, which are pre-Golden Dawn, but based on Atea's interpretations of the cards. So it's a nice option for people who want to learn traditional cartomancy without the influence of the Golden Dawn associations. He does acknowledge Golden Dawn associations as well. So he brings together a pretty comprehensive group of elements, even going much further back than Atea's time. Some of the triumphs are based in art on the Estensi Tarot, for example. And he has a really interesting take on court cards, which I look forward to talking about. But let's talk about the challenge itself. Drop 'em 78 is DROPM, and the D stands for dropping anchor with the coins. So we start the challenge with the coins suit and move our way through from October 15th through to the end of the year. Next is responding with the batons, or taking an active part in the world around us. O is opening up with the cups, and P is piercing with the swords. Then M is manifesting with the triumphs or majors. So that's the order that we go through the cards day by day. And then each daily post is structured with either 3 or 4 Ds. Now, she's changed how she's talked about that over the years. So the first D is the definition of the card. And for that, you use either the studies you've done in the past, or if the card comes with an extended guidebook, which this one does. So I'll be using Paul Huson's extended Dame Fortune's Wheel Tarot pictorial key, as well as his book, Mystical Origins of the Tarot, whenever I have time. So I'm giving myself some options each day, so it can be flexible depending on how much time I have. That's the first D of our daily posts. D2 is a detail. So each card we find a detail that catches our eye that day. For example, the way the person in green is holding their hat in front of them, and what that could mean for this card. And it's going to be something specific to the art in that card of that specific target deck. So you have your main target deck that you're focusing on, and I'll expand upon that in a minute. So second D is a detail, and just make a connection about how that detail relates to the definition of the card. The third D originally was discovery and would include 3 different possible elements. The first one, how you notice that card manifesting during your day. The second one would be how have you related to that card with a real life situation in the past. And the third possible one is how it relates to the same card of a different calibrating deck. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So the third D in the past has been discovery, and that's the way I'm going to do this challenge this year, so that I have some options for my third D. And if nothing else works out for the day, at least I'll be able to just compare it with my calibrating deck. The way she talks about it now is the third D is day, and so you just relate your card to the day you've had, find that card somewhere in your day and talk about that. And then you can expand upon that into the fourth D of discovery, which is comparing it to a calibrating deck. So I'm not doing it that way because the first 3 Ds with the day, that has been my daily journaling practice for years now. and I've come across that recommendation multiple times. The one I remember the most being from Tom Benjamin, that if you're gonna do a daily 1 card draw practice, try to find that card in your day or relate that card to your day. Looking at the card, looking up definitions, journaling about that, and then paying attention to how I've seen it in my day, and then reflecting on that at the end of the day. That is my my daily journaling practice. I wouldn't say I do that every single day, but I do go long streaks of sticking to that. But from experience, I know that sometimes I get home from work and I draw a blank and I forgot about my dang card all day long, and then I get home and do my journaling and I'm just at a loss and I'm too tired to come up with any way that I can relate that card to my day. So because I know that's going to happen, I am going to bring in a calibrating deck, and for me that's going to be the CBD Tarot. And so my third D is going to be discovery, and it's going to incorporate all three of those possibilities, any of them I can think of. And if nothing else, at the very least, I'll just compare it to a pretty standard, straightforward Marseille deck, which is my my go-to deck. Not this one in particular, but I chose the CBD because it is a really good representation of TDM. My only complaint with it is that in order to make it more appealing to a contemporary audience, he did add some smiley faces. I'm not a fan of the smiley faces. I like the grumpy faces, but they're not too bad, and it's a really great representation, a very clear representation that just looks really good with the with Dame Fortune's Wheel Tarot. So I think those will be a nice pair. The CBD is also not one that's in my daily rotation, so I'm not going to miss taking it out and reserving it for this purpose. For the most part, she talks about your calibrating deck as being one that you know really well, because the purpose of Drop 'em 78, and I'll post one video where she talks about calibration in terms of your target deck, and what she means by that is to study a deck to the extent that it becomes a really good, reliable reader for you. And so that is the purpose of this challenge. And the best way that she recommends to use a second deck to help calibrate this one is to use one that you're very familiar with. And so for me, that's going to be, you know, any standard TDM deck. And you can compare them visually, compare and contrast the meanings that you normally see in this card compared to the guidebook of your target deck. So this is referred to as the target deck, the one that you're studying. She puts it as one that is a little bit of a stretch that you're not 100% confident with and want to become more confident with, but not a strain. She describes this as the source deck, and this one ideally should be one that you're really comfortable with. She also opens it up for more advanced practitioners of this challenge to have two decks that you're unfamiliar with and compare and contrast those. You can also have your calibration system a completely different divination system like charms. You can do an apples to apples comparison where you're comparing the same card from each deck, or an apples to oranges comparison where you're shuffling this deck and choosing something random. Those more variable options, and in fact even adding a second deck, is recommended for folks who've already done the challenge before. The common sense recommendation, if this is your first time doing the challenge, is to only do your target deck. I'm not following that recommendation just because I do want to have the option of being able to compare apples to apples between the two decks if I can't think of anything else for my third D. But I'm keeping it super simple and easy and using a very familiar deck of cards, and I will compare them apples to apples rather than shuffling this deck. I will post links straight from Esther from her Drop 'em 78 playlist below, and I'll kind of describe what's in each of those videos if you want to learn more. All of these are concepts, for the most part, from her book Mindful Tarot, which you might remember is my first tarot book other than the Mother Peace books. If I feel up for it, I might use this as a resource. So that's 3 potential books that I'll be using for this challenge. For the most part, I'll really be sticking to this. Now, the Dame Fortune's Wheel Tarot does also have a little white book. I doubt I'll be referring to that too much because there's not a whole lot to it. Even this book is really pretty brief, which is why I decided, you know, whenever I have time, I will bring in Paul Huson's more extended book, Mystical Origins of the Tarot. This is a really beautiful deck that I'm looking forward to going through with you. This Significator card is an extra one, so it won't be included in Drop 'em 78. So I may as well take a moment to tell you about it now. It is from, I think he said, a medieval depiction that associates the different zodiac signs to parts of the body, and he color codes them with elements. In Mystical Origins of the Tarot, he refers to the 4 elements as Pythagorean elements, which is not accurate. In this book, he refers to them as Aristotelian elements, which is also not accurate. It was actually Empedocles who came up with the concept of the 4 roots of water, earth, air, and fire making up all things. Of course, that's not true. That was treated as something that, was possibly factual for centuries until, I don't know, like medieval Islamic chemists, sometime before 1000 CE, disproved that. Empedocles was, around 400-ish CE, or a little earlier. He was alive just after the time of Pythagoras. But the 4 roots weren't even referred to as elements until Plato. And Plato did associate the 4 elements with Pythagorean shapes, and so maybe that's where Paul Huson got that association. And later, after that, it was Aristotle who added the 5th element of ether. So he doesn't really explain in either book why he associates the classical elements first with Pythagoras in his whole older book and then with Aristotle in this book. But neither one is correct, just to set the record straight there. He does kind of mention the elements associated with the suits in this book, but more as a side note. They really aren't inherent to his cards. So if you don't work with elemental associations, or if you work with elemental associations that don't align with the Golden Dawn, then this deck isn't going to cause any troubles. But it is a little bit odd that he goes with the Golden Dawn associations that are the most popular today, but certainly aren't the default, especially when we're talking about historical tarot. He does credit Atea with the inclusion of a significator card. For folks who do use significators in their readings, he thought thought that having a separate card would mean that you wouldn't use up one of your court or triumph cards and take that out of the running for the rest of your card reading. Personally, I've never figured out the value of having a significator card. If you use them, please do tell me, because I'm super curious about it. I have a few decks that have separate significator cards. I've seen other tarot readers say that they love having a separate significator card, but I've never figured out how to put them to good use. So please do tell me in the comments if you have a good suggestion for using a significator card. Let me look up real quick what he says about this significator card. So he says he designs this significator card from a 16th century manuscript that illustrates the astrological rulership of the zodiacal signs over parts of the human body, which are divided into the 4 Aristotelian elements, which are actually Empedoclean elements. He does note that Atea referred to his significator cards as the Atea. And I did consider using the Atea deck as my calibrating source deck, but I'm not familiar enough with that deck at all for that to make sense. If this were not my first time doing the challenge, that would have been really cool, but I want to keep it easy on myself. There is the temptation of wanting to bring in one of the Atea decks every now and then, but I'm going to try to hold off on that. She says that you can be polyamorous with your decks and have a side piece, but go steady with just these 2 decks, just your main deck and your side piece and no others. So I'm going to try to follow her advice there. By the way, there is a Mindful Tarot Facebook group, which I'll link in the description. And a good piece of advice I saw in there was, if you miss a day, don't try to make up missed days, just move on to the next day. And the perfectionist in me is going to have a very hard time doing that. And also, if I make myself make up all of the days that I potentially miss, that could derail the whole thing. So I will give myself permission. If I have a day where I don't have time to post, I will just skip that day and not try to catch up. The other really good idea that I saw from Tarot with Mims, and I'll post her video about her plans for the challenge. She said that last fall she did a separate longer video for each of the 4 suits to kind of summarize her progress through each of those suits. So I plan to do that as well, and that'll give me an opportunity, if I miss any cards, to go back and mention those if possible. So those are my plans. The structure that I'm going to follow is to read my first D, the definition, at night, so at least from this book, if not from Mystical Origins as well, and then look at the card to find what detail stands out to me and what that means to me in the context of the meaning. I'll journal those first 2 Ds the night before, just to make it easy on myself, and then I'll wake up in the morning, read my journal entry, look at the card again, and then go about my day and see if I either notice anything about my day that relates to that card, and or remember any way that I've related to that card in the past. And at the end of the day, I will journal my reflection as well as my comparison to the same card in the CBD Tarot. And then I will do a quick video under 3 minutes on my phone, so it won't be super nice or anything, but it'll be nice and quick, and communicate that information. And I'll post those both on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. In all honesty, I am not sure that this challenge will have the intended outcome for me with this deck, because I am not a super big fan of reading illustrated pip decks. I really do prefer pips that are neutral, maybe with a little bit of fun decoration to spark the imagination, or illustrations that are more artistic but not necessarily scenic. These pips really are scenic. You know, they have stuff happening in them. They're not neutral, and they do convey a pretty specific meaning for the most part. They have mood and emotion to them, which I do prefer an emotionally neutral pip card. So I'm honestly not sure if this deck will become a good reader for me through this process, but that isn't my main purpose. I really wanted to learn more about tarot history. I'm always game for that, and there are some really cool elements of tarot history incorporated into this deck. And I also wanted to learn more about Atea's meanings, because he was influenced by pre-esoteric traditional cartomancers, and I'm kind of in a place right now where I'm questioning some of the associations that I've learned so far. My preferred way to read pips is to take the symbolism of the suit, unencumbered by elemental correspondences, and combine that with the symbolism of the number, and creatively blend those, as Patishi says, to land on a meaning for that card. And that gives you a whole lot of, variability, a lot of different options. But with Marseille and other pip decks, there's no one tradition. And so every single guidebook you read will have different meanings for the numbers. And that's one area where, I've just been wondering about, I really enjoyed learning Uda Picard's associations, because it became clear, even though he didn't list his number associations, I was able to glean those from his individual card meanings. It became clear that he was using numerical associations directly from the triumphs of the Tarot de Marseille, which is a super traditional way to read numbers. And I actually really liked his numerical definitions. The other one that a lot of TDM readers use are the Pythagorean number associations. I kind of combined those. That's the influence from Anna Maria Marsucci. She incorporates both the Pythagorean associations and the associations that come from the triumphs themselves. But I'd like to see if I can extract what the numbers meant to Atea by looking a little more deeply at his meanings. I'm not sure that there will be a system that I will notice, but I'll definitely take this opportunity to see if I can notice any patterns and deepen my understanding of the numerical symbolism. Now, a little bit more of a shout out to this book. I love this book. He gives a little bit of the pre-esoteric history, but he really focuses on esoteric history. And one of the really cool things about his tarot meanings, so he'll give Atea's meanings, maybe somebody earlier, then Mather's meaning. What was his name? He was one of the founders of the Golden Dawn. Oh yeah, MacGregor Mathers. I guess his full name is Samuel Little MacGregor Mathers, but I think he normally is referred to as MacGregor Mathers. One of the 3 founders of the Golden Dawn. He lists Golden Dawn specific meanings, and then Arthur Waite's meaning, which is really interesting. And then he kind of comes up with his suggested interpretation. So it's a really helpful book, especially if you're interested in the various esoteric traditions. I'm not super into the esoteric traditions, but I can't deny that they come from traditional cartomancy. They are kind of the dominant way of seeing the tarot in contemporary times, so I think it's important to be aware of them. My other favorite part about this book is one of the appendices, which is a description of the different traditional patterns of the tarot. I absolutely love this reference. So if you don't have this book, or maybe haven't gotten through this book yet, definitely check out this appendix at the end. It's so good. It's been a while since I've read all of it. I use it frequently as a resource, but this was written in the 90s, 98 maybe. And one thing I've noticed when I've gone back and reread Older books like this, I sometimes find some inaccuracies here and there. Oh, this is 2004, so it's not quite as early. But yeah, for example, William's Minchiati book, I read, I don't know, over a year ago, probably, or sometime last year at the very least. And when I've gone back this year, after learning a whole lot more about the Minchiati, I found a few inaccuracies here and there, but I think that is the book I'm thinking of. That's from 1998 or something like that. So, he just had limited resources. So this, I'd have to read it cover to cover again to see if I notice any inaccuracies based on the knowledge I've gained since first reading it. But for the most part, it's a really great book, especially if you are interested in the different esoteric correspondences and how they differ from one philosophy to another. But for the most part, I'll probably stick mostly to this book, this deck, and the CBD Tarot. I'm really excited to do this challenge. I think I'm going to learn a lot, and maybe it'll even turn this into a deck that I enjoy reading. We'll see. That's not my main purpose of doing this challenge, but if that's the outcome, then I'm not going to complain. Definitely. Thank you so much for joining me today. Let me know if you're doing the challenge and where you'll be posting, because I would be interested in following your challenge as well. Otherwise, look for my shorts here or on Instagram if you're interested in following Drop 'em 78 with me. Thanks again, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.